And this, my esteemed students, I announce with a smirk that stretched across my face, is what humans call their greatest achievement in space warfare. The screen behind me displayed a crude Earth vessel, its blocky design an insult to the elegant curves of proper Zeon engineering. Notice their primitive kinetic weapons. They still believe throwing metal at high speed is the peak of combat innovation. My name is Commander Vex Thor of the 7th Saxy Fleet Academy. For the past 30 years, I've taught advanced space combat theory to the brightest minds in the Galactic Alliance. Today's lesson: how not to wage war in space, courtesy of our newest allies, humans. The classroom erupted in laughter. My students, barely into their second metamorphosis, understood what most of the Alliance had already concluded. Humans were a joke in the cosmic arena. "Commander," called out Cadet Naira, her crystalline exoskeleton gleaming under the Academy's quantum lights. "Is it true they still use actual beings to pilot their ships? Not even basic quantum AI?" "Oh, it gets better," I replied, projecting another image, this one showing a human pilot strapped into what they called a cockpit. They insist on manual control. Can you believe it? While we execute perfect battle formations through distributed consciousness networks, they rely on, what do they call it? Ah, yes, gut instinct. More laughter filled the room. These younglings, like the rest of the Alliance, found humans utterly ridiculous. I switched to the next slide, showing their planetary defense network. Observe their scattered approach to system defense. No quantum entanglement fields, no temporal distortion barriers. They protect their worlds with satellites, actual physical objects floating in space. One well-placed gravity pulse, and their entire network would collapse faster than a dying star. The amusement in the room was palpable, like a thick fog of superiority. I basked in it, remember my own academy days when I first learned about these peculiar beings who had somehow stumbled into faster-than-light travel. "But surely," interrupted Cadet Klex, his thought patterns radiating genuine confusion, "they must have some redeeming qualities. The Council wouldn't have admitted them into the Alliance otherwise." I waved all three of my primary appendages dismissively. "Politics, young one. Pure politics. They have resources we want. We have technology they need. A simple trade agreement blown out of proportion by bureaucrats who wouldn't know a phase cannon from a food synthesizer." The screen shifted to display human military formations. Look at these battle patterns. Linear thinking in a three-dimensional space. No consideration for quantum possibilities or probability manipulation. They fight like they're still confined to planetary surfaces. As I prepared to move on to the next part of my lecture, a subtle vibration rippled through my communication implant. A priority message. During class? How irregular. Little did I know, it was the beginning of our greatest embarrassment. "Commander Vex Thor," the message pulsed urgently through my neural interface. "Report to the Grand Strategy Chamber immediately. Human vessels detected in the Proxima Sector." I dismissed my class with a casual wave, certain I would return to continue mocking human inadequacies. After all, what threat could they possibly pose? Our quantum sensors had detected 3 of their crude ships limping through space near our outpost. Probably lost, I thought, or maybe their primitive navigation systems had malfunctioned. The Grand Strategy Chamber buzzed with activity when I arrived. Admiral Kylak stood at the center, his bioluminescent patterns flashing with annoyance. "Ah, Commander, perhaps you can explain why 3 human vessels are approaching our most sensitive research facility. Most likely a navigational error, Admiral. Their technology is." I trailed off as new data flooded the quantum displays. "That cannot be correct. The human ships were moving in patterns that defied our combat algorithms. Instead of maintaining proper formation, they spun and tumbled through space like damaged debris. Our targeting systems couldn't establish a lock. Their movements were too random, too chaotic." "Are their systems malfunctioning?" someone asked. Then we heard it. A transmission broadcast on all frequencies, in a voice that made my primary heart stop. A child's voice. This is Madison Reynolds, age 12 and 3/4, requesting permission to demonstrate our new combat system. The chamber erupted in laughter. A human child playing with military vessels? This had to be a joke. Admiral Kylax's response dripped with condescension. "Little human, this is a restricted military zone. Return to your video games." The rest of his sentence vanished in a blast of static as our quantum communication network crashed. No, not just crashed. It had been corrupted with gaming software. Our most sophisticated military systems were being flooded with something called Ultra Mega Space Battles 5000. "Sorry about that," Madison's voice chirped through backup channels. "I needed to level the playing field. You see, I figured out that your fancy quantum systems are super vulnerable to good old-fashioned computer viruses, especially ones designed by kids who spend way too much time hacking MMOs. Before we could process this absurdity, the human ships launched their attack. But instead of proper military tactics, they moved like characters in those primitive entertainment simulations humans called video games. They barrel-rolled through our defense grid, pulling maneuvers that should have torn their ships apart. Our automated defense systems, programmed for logical combat patterns, couldn't track them. The humans were breaking every rule of space combat we'd established over millennia, and leading this chaos was a 12-year-old girl who treated interstellar warfare like her personal playground. "You guys take this way too seriously," Madison's voice echoed through our systems. "War isn't about perfect formations and mathematical probabilities. Sometimes you just need to button mash and hope for the best." In less than 20 minutes, our outpost defenses were completely neutralized. Not a single shot had been fired. Our own automated systems had done most of the damage, trying to hit targets that moved like drunken asteroids through space. The final insult? Madison sent us a scoreboard ranking our performance against her previous high scores. We had been defeated, not by their military, not by their advanced technology, but by a human child who approached space combat with the logic of a game. The Galactic Alliance Council demanded answers. How had a human child breached our defenses? More importantly, why were they letting her explain it to us? Yet there she stood, in the grand hall of the Zeon Military Academy, practically bouncing with excitement as she prepared her presentation. "Okay, so first off," Madison Reynolds announced, her hair tied in what humans call pigtails, "your entire approach to space combat is super boring. No offense. Admiral Kylax's bioluminescent patterns flash with outrage. Our combat doctrine has been perfected over 12,000 years. "Yeah, that's kind of the problem," Madison replied, pulling out what appeared to be a gaming console. "You guys got stuck in a rut. Watch this." The holographic display sprang to life, showing a virtual battlefield. But instead of proper military formations, it displayed what looked like pure chaos. Ships spinning, rolling, using debris as cover, even playing what appeared to be a game of tag with enemy vessels. "See, I created this training program by combining every space combat video game ever made," Madison explained, her fingers flying over the controls. "Then I added physics engines from the latest VR systems, mixed in some MMO raid mechanics, and topped it off with good old-fashioned button-mashing unpredictability." The room fell silent as we watched virtual ships performing maneuvers that violated every principle of proper space combat. They used gravity wells as slingshots, treated asteroid fields like obstacle courses, and somehow turned their own engine exhaust into makeshift weapons. Part 6. "But there's no logic to these movements," I protested, my tertiary eyes twitching in distress. "How can you predict battle outcomes without proper quantum probability calculations?" Madison rolled her eyes. "That's your second problem. You try to calculate everything. Sometimes, you've just got to go with the flow. Like this." She demonstrated a maneuver that made several senior officers nauseous. "I call this one the Super Ultra Reverse Triple Coffee Spin." "Coffee?" Admiral Kylax questioned. "Yeah, 'cause I invented it at 3 a.m. while hopped up on hot chocolate, since Mom says I'm not allowed real coffee yet." The next hour was a crash course in what Madison called gaming the system. She showed us how human teenagers could outmaneuver our best pilots simply by treating warfare like an elaborate video game. Their training programs didn't rely on complex quantum calculations or rigid battle doctrines. Instead, they learned through virtual reality simulations that encourage creativity, split-second decisions, and completely insane tactical choices. Part 7. The best part, Madison grinned, showing off what I learned was called braces on her teeth. We're using your own technology against you. All those quantum sensors and automated defense systems, they're basically aimbots and wall hacks. Any decent gamer knows how to counter those. The horror slowly dawned on us. Humans weren't advancing their military technology in the traditional sense. Instead, they were turning our own sophisticated systems into tools for their chaotic style of combat. And leading this revolution were children. Children who approached space warfare with the same enthusiasm they brought to their digital entertainment. Part 8. Oh, and check this out, Madison said, activating what she called her streaming setup. Suddenly, we were watching dozens of human children, all playing her combat simulation game, all learning to fight in ways that defied our tactical databases. We've got over 1 million players now, she beamed. Every time they play, the AI learns new techniques. It's like crowdsourcing battle tactics. Except everyone thinks they're just playing the hottest new space combat game. Admiral Kylax's patterns had faded to a sickly pale blue. You're saying your entire species is unknowingly training for war through entertainment. Well, duh, Madison replied. Why do you think we made space combat look exactly like our video games? The muscle memory kicks in automatically. She demonstrated by closing her eyes and perfectly executing a series of impossible maneuvers. I can do this in my sleep. Literally. I sleepwalk sometimes, and Mom says I air pilot to the house. Part 9. The implications were staggering. While we had spent millennia perfecting the art of proper space combat, humans had turned warfare into a game. Their pilots didn't need years of training in quantum physics or probability mathematics. They just needed good reflexes, creativity, and a willingness to try the stupidest possible solution to any given problem. Want to know the really scary part? Madison asked, her grin turning mischievous. This is just version 1.0. Wait until you see what happens when we add multiplayer raid mechanics and rocket jumping. I didn't know what rocket jumping meant, but judging by the gleam in her eyes, I didn't want to find out. The Galactic Alliance had grossly underestimated humanity's capacity for turning serious matters into entertainment. And now, we were paying the price. Part 10. The Battle of Neptune's Rings began like a bad joke. Our fleet, 5,000 ships strong, faced off against a mere 300 human vessels. The battlefield? The sprawling ice rings of their solar system's 8th planet. Victory should have been assured. Should have been. Admiral, my voice wavered as I reported from the tactical station. The humans they're splitting into what they call raid groups. Admiral Kylax's bioluminescent patterns flickered with confusion. Raid groups? What nonsense is this? Before I could explain, Madison's voice crackled through our command channel. Hey guys! Ready for a boss fight. The human ships had arranged themselves into small squadrons of varying sizes, some groups of 10, others of 25, each led by what they called a raid leader. The formations made no tactical sense until they started moving. Group A, start the poll. A human commander ordered. Groups B and C, get ready for the ad phase. Healers, stay back and watch your mana. What followed was pure chaos. The human squadrons moved like swarms of angry insects, each with distinct roles that seemed to follow some incomprehensible gaming logic. Their smaller ships, which they called DPS, darted through our formations with suicidal speed. Larger vessels, designated as tanks, absorbed our fire while drawing our ships into deadly traps. Warning, our tactical AI blared. Unknown energy signatures detected. Those would be the healers, Madison's voice chimed in. Human ships equipped with experimental technology that can actually repair battle damage in real time. They call it health regen and shield buffs. We call it impossible. Admiral, I watched in horror as our neat battle lines dissolved into disarray. They're using Neptune's rings as cover. Our targeting systems can't distinguish between ice fragments and their ships. Of course not, Madison's voice replied. That's called using environmental mechanics. Basic game design. Our fleet's traditional approach was falling apart. The humans weren't just fighting. They were playing. Their ships performed maneuvers with names that made me question their sanity. The Leroy Jenkins Special, Kite and Spike, 360 no-scope drive-by. Time for Phase 2, Madison announced cheerfully, initiating what I call the pizza roll maneuver. I watched in disbelief as human ships began using our own fleet as cover, weaving between our vessels with precision that shouldn't have been possible. Our automated targeting systems, confused by their proximity, started registering friendly fire incidents. Turn off the automation, Admiral Kylax commanded. Switch to manual control. That was exactly what they wanted. The moment we disabled our automated systems, the humans launched what they called their ultimate combo. Ships moved in synchronized patterns, like some demented dance routine they had practiced this. I realized, practiced it in games until it became muscle memory. Keep them grouped up, a human commander called out. Setting up for the AOE. AOE, I would later learn, stood for Area of Effect. In this case, it meant dozens of human ships releasing clouds of metallic particles into space, transforming Neptune's rings into a giant electromagnetic disruption field. Our quantum communications went dark. Boom! Madison's voice somehow still came through. That's what we call a crowd control combo. Now for the fun part. The fun part involved human ships using the planet's magnetic field to slingshot themselves at impossible speeds. They called it sequence breaking and speedrunning strats. We called it a nightmare. Our formations broke. Disciplined battle groups devolved into individual ships, trying to survive what humans called bullet hell patterns. The ice rings became a graveyard of disabled vessels. Our own technology turned against us by children who treated warfare like a game. Admiral, I reported, my patterns pulsing with distress. We're losing ships to something they call spawn camping. Indeed, human vessels had positioned themselves near our fleet's designated rally points, picking off reinforcements the moment they arrived, a tactic apparently borrowed from something called PvP servers. Almost got the achievement. Madison's voice sang out. Who wants to try for a speedrun record? The next few minutes were a blur of human ships performing what they called trick shots and combo moves. They used our own ships as jumping points, redirected our weapon fire with precisely placed debris, and somehow turned Neptune's atmospheric storms into makeshift propulsion systems. Final phase, the call went out across human channels. Time for the boss's loot drop. That loot drop turned out to be our own command ship, disabled by a maneuver that Madison proudly called the streaming special. Named, she explained, because it looks cool on camera. Apparently, the entire battle was being broadcast live to millions of human viewers, complete with commentary and something called subscriber alerts. Part 16. GG. The human channels echoed with incomprehensible gamer speak as our fleet surrendered. POG moment. Clip that. In less than 2 hours, the most advanced fleet in the Galactic Alliance had been defeated by humans using tactics from video games. The Battle of Neptune's Rings would go down in history, not as a military engagement, but as what humans called a pro-gamer move. Thanks for the practice run, Madison's final message came through as their ships formed up for victory screenshots. This is going to make such a great YouTube video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I stood on our broken bridge, watching human ships perform victory dances in space, literal choreographed movements they called emotes, and realized that warfare would never be the same. The age of proper military doctrine was over. The era of the gamer had begun. 3 months after the Battle of Neptune's Rings, I found myself standing in what humans called a gaming center, watching cadets from our most prestigious military academy playing something called Fortnite. The Galactic Alliance Military Command had made an unprecedented decision. If we couldn't beat them, we joined them. And so, here I was, Commander Vex Thor, decorated veteran of a dozen campaigns, learning about quickscoping from a teenager with purple hair. No, Professor V, Madison Reynolds, now officially our Strategic Innovation Advisor, corrected my grip on the gaming controller. You're thinking too logically again. Sometimes, you just got to yeet yourself into the situation. Yeet, I muttered, adding another incomprehensible human term to my growing vocabulary. My secondary appendages twitched as I tried to master this strange device. Part 18. But the trajectory calculations. Stop calculating. Madison threw her hands up in exasperation. That's why you guys keep losing. Here, watch this. She took the controller and proceeded to demonstrate something called a 360 no-scope triple kill, which violated at least 7 laws of physics and all known military doctrine. The worst part, it worked. The changes in our military training were dramatic. Traditional quantum combat simulators were replaced with what Madison called sick gaming rigs. Perfectly calculated battle formations gave way to something humans called rush strats and cheese tactics. Today's lesson, Madison announced to a room full of alien officers, their bioluminescent patterns glowing with confusion, is about thinking outside the box, and sometimes throwing the box into a star, because boxes are for noobs.